I had a guest actually come on this podcast before Jimmy Carr. Jimmy Carr was on 2 weeks ago, and we had a great conversation about happiness and the nature of happiness. And the guest before Jimmy Carr wrote in my diary, which is a tradition we have now where all the guests that come on write a question for the next guest. So there is a question in there for you. But the guest wrote a question which changed his life, which is, are you happy? And I, from reading your work and understanding your position on happiness and it not being the thing to aim for, which really struck me because I thought, I thought life was the North Star of our lives was to try and be happy. Mm-hmm. I guess my question is, what I was going to ask you that question.
Aim to be good and pray for happiness.
So the question I was going to, is pretty much that is, what is a better question for me to ask you if I'm checking in on you? Because we asked that question with good intentions. Are you happy? What's a better question for me to ask Jordan Peterson?
How are you doing?
How are you doing? How are you doing?
Brilliantly and terribly. That's when you listen to a profound piece of music, one that sort of spans the whole emotional experience, it's not happy. Happy is elevator music, and probably you just shouldn't listen to that at all, right? And you think, why? Well, it's harmless, it's treacly, it's sweet, it's simple, it lacks depth, it's shallow, that's a problem. It doesn't have that deep sense of awe and horror, I would say, that is characteristic of the best of all music. You listen to some simple music, so-called. Hank Williams is a good example. The blues cowboy from the 50s who died of alcoholism when he was 27 and whose voice sounds like an 80-year-old man. Simple melody, but there's nothing simple in the song and in the voice. It's deep, it's like the blues. It's like black blues in the States from the 20s, and this was certainly influenced by that tradition. There's this admission of a deep suffering at the same time as you get the beautiful transcendence of the music. And that's meaning, that's awful in the most fundamental sense, but you need an antidote to suffering, and it has to be deep. And deep moves you tectonically, and it's not a trivial thing. But that's better than happiness. And maybe if you're lucky while you're pursuing that and while you're immersed in it, you get to be happy, and you should fall on your knees and be grateful for that when it happens. It's a gift. It really is a gift. And it comes upon you unexpectedly, your happiness, But you aim to climb uphill to the highest peak you can possibly envision. And that's better than happiness.
Why did you include terribly?
Well, for example, now when I go, wherever I go in the world, people come up to me and they're usually, I wouldn't say they're happy to see me. They're often in tears, and they often have a pretty rough story to relate. They were suicidal or nihilistic or homicidal or trapped, desperate, and they tell me that real fast. And then they say, I've overcome that to a large degree, and thank you for that. And you think, well, that's really something to have that happen over and over. In some ways, you might think, well, how could anything better possibly happen to you than to have people come up to you all over the world, strangers, and open themselves up like that, like they're old friends so quickly. But at the same time, it's an awful thing because you see, even in the revelation of their triumph, the initial depth of their despair. So I wouldn't change that. But it's not nothing. And it's certainly not just happiness. It's better than happiness, but it's almost unbearable. God, tears again. It's been quite a 2 weeks in the UK. It's been amazing. It's been amazing. Such a great country, this country. It's such a profound place. And it was so wonderful to see Cambridge and Oxford and to be welcomed by the students. And
I saw the queues around the block and the reaction you got. I watched the talk in Cambridge, and it was so wonderful to see, because I know that you don't do what you do for credit. That kind of seems to be the antithesis of the pursuing your truth and doing it in the cause of truth. But it was so wonderful to see someone that I know has had such a profound impact on so many be received in such a way. We have a closing tradition.
Okay.
One of the, I don't normally do this, but one of the really great CEOs in our country, a young guy, has built a multi-billion-dollar company, really great guy, sat here yesterday, and I actually told him for the first time who he was writing the question for, and I couldn't believe his face. Oh my God, that's the one person I want to have dinner with. This is probably the most successful young person in our country. And so he knew who he was writing the question for. So the question that the previous guest wrote is, why do you do what you do?
to see what will happen. Some programs you cannot predict, right? You cannot predict how they're going to end. You have to run them. Well, I believe that truth will save the world. I believe that. So you speak truthfully and you watch what happens and you take your consequences, and maybe you hope and have some faith that in the final analysis, things will work out in your favor, but perhaps they will and perhaps they won't. But that's faith, eh? That's faith. Faith isn't believing in things you regard as ridiculous, sacrificing your intellect. It's a decision, Will truth, beauty, and love save the world? Well, you can find out.